On the north side of the Clanrye estuary was another terminus, Warrenpoint. This was also a planned town built around three sides of a large square, with docks, shipyard and railway station nearby. Holiday and excursion traffic in the summer made this a busy little place, especially on sunny weekends. But there was also a steady freight trade to and from the goods yard, from the sidings laid along the piers, and from the factory which made concrete sleepers for the railway system. So, engines were always coming and going, and all of the tender locomotives needed to be turned before making the return journey. The early construction of this railway line along the flat northern shore of the estuary had helped to change what had been just a short time before an almost deserted sandy rabbit warren into this thriving port and seaside resort. Among the fine houses on the promenade was the Great Northern Hotel, one of the establishments built by the railway companies to encourage travel. For the prosperous business people and their families, this was the perfect place to spend the summer, with its southwesterly aspect and mild climate. Rostrevor, around the corner just over 2 miles away, was even more select. It was closer to the open sea, so the waves were stronger. There was a little harbour here, and the beautifully sited hotel, also called the Great Northern. It had been developed by the railway company into one of the finest in the county, and was famed for the excellence of its afternoon teas. Until the First World War, a horse tram linked it round the coast to the railway. A ferry service to Meath departed from the boat slip at Albert Street in Warrenpoint. Although this journey was only a short distance, it was an international voyage. Indeed, for 6 years after 1939, it was a journey from a country at war into a neutral one. As a smuggling route it became famous, but it also allowed a connection to the Dundalk, Newry and Greenore Railway, which passed by narrow water on its way to pick up the voyagers at Omeath. The terminus at Greenore was incorporated into a grand hotel on the pier, which at one time had been linked by covered passageway to the steamers of the fast Holyhead service. The London and North Western Railway Company, which ran the ships and the lines to Newry and Dundalk, built an English railway town in miniature, way out here on the estuary, with its own school and power station. Its 2 streets, Euston and Anglesey, housed workers from the extensive railway yards. But financial success eluded the company, and competition halted the passenger ships and the boat connection to Greencastle. Transport of livestock continued even after the ferry service ceased, and for a time Greenore became a holiday resort with the Great Northern Railway Company running the hotel. But like many institutions on the estuary, it was blighted by the presence of the border, which split even the passage at narrow water. Customs men were stationed in their little hut by the passenger ferry here, which had once been served by its own railway halt on the Warrenpoint line. Cross-border tourism by car was restricted by the requirements for triptychs and other documents. Travel without these usually resulted in frustrating and often fruitless diversions to the examination station on the quay in Newry. But a Sunday school trip to Warrenpoint needed no permission. In the 1930s, many older people in Rich Hill remembered the terrible railway disaster and put their faith in buses to carry their precious grandchildren. Early in the morning, to the accompaniment of the local flute band, the square was the gathering place. People came from all directions, dressed in their Sunday best, and joined in the procession through the village. Excitement was in the air, the sun was shining, and very soon they would be at the seaside. They carried no buckets, no spades, no swimming costumes, for many of these children didn't know what the seaside was like, but it was exciting all the same. The very thought of travelling all that way in one of those lovely shiny buses was wonderful. On and on they came in careful formation along Merchant's Quay in Newry, across the swing bridge into the town, and out by the quiet road past Narrow Water. This was the seaside, but there was work to do first. All paraded behind the band through the town and were then invited to eat in the church hall with loads of sandwiches and gallons of tea. But the children wanted the sea, with maybe an ice cream first. Who wants tea on a nice day like this? And then at last, down to the beach, all dressed for the occasion. Someone had found a shop which sold buckets and spades. But where was the sand to build castles? The grannies decided to sit this one out. While the young girls enjoyed making their own fun in the water, their older sisters preferred to be rowed by a real sailor or to take a short trip along the coast on the Ferry Queen. It couldn't be a more perfect day. Sunday schools from Portadown were happy to use the train. Every year, excursions, such as the one run by the Canon, also went to Warrenpoint. When the children and the picnics had been brought together, it was time for the seafront. By the late 50s, people had more idea of what to expect here, and for most it was a return visit. But the youngsters still found fascination in the boats and the water. For the older ones, the attraction was the fine open-air swimming pool on the promenade. Here, the techniques developed near home in deep holes on the upper ban could be refined and really put to the test. The boys could show off and the girls enjoy the unaccustomed attention. Here, the plain little girl or boy from the next street would suddenly become rather attractive. Just around the corner, the jaunting cars waited to take the trippers on short journeys around the coast or into the lower slopes of the moorlands. It might have been quicker by Lambretta, but from up here, the view was much better. You could get off at the ferry Glen and walk up the Kilbrony River, but then there'd be no time to go over to Omeath. There were jaunting cars here too, loads of them taking the devout up the road to Calvary, and the backsliders to the pubs along the way. Sometimes the groups may have got mixed up, and the more adaptable did both. There were donkey rides on the stony beach, but they weren't a great thrill. There was no speed in a donkey. But the real delight of the place was the row of little shops selling cheap souvenirs and the most incredible collection of imported junk, which didn't seem to be on sale anywhere else. Because this was an exotic place over the seas and over the border, everybody bought something and wondered why afterwards. When the money was all gone, there wasn't much left to see. The railway station with its elegant trains was now just a cottage. But back in Warrenpoint, the excursion engine was preparing for departure. The lost children had been found, the teenagers had reappeared holding hands, and all were crammed aboard for the return trip back to Portadown, following the tidal Clanrye once again as far as Newry. At Narrowwater Crossing, the weight of the engine had magically changed halfpennies into pennies. But the excursions were coming to an end. Time was running out for the Warrenpoint line. In a way, the railways contributed to their own destruction. By now, the motor car was king. The government-commissioned Benson report on railways in Northern Ireland had recommended closure of all the branch lines. So in the summer of 1964, a trainload of enthusiasts from the Railway Record Society travelled to Warrenpoint. By the following January, another of the Clanrye connections had been broken.